How you guys doing? It is fantastic to be back in Chicagoland, which I called home for 7 of the best years of my life so far. Many thanks to AFP Illinois for hosting this gathering, and a big thank you to all of you for giving up really a prime autumn Saturday to gather here in this windowless room and help advance a cause that we all share. In a few hours, I'm actually hopping back on a flight, heading back home to D.C., and with any luck, I might cross paths at the airport with your very own Stanley Cup champion Chicago Blackhawks, who are headed to D.C. for an event at the White House actually on Monday. As is customary, when teams win championships, they go to the White House and have their photo op. And from what I understand, President Obama is going to honor the Blackhawks by wearing team jerseys signed by all the players. And to honor President Obama, the Blackhawks are going to shut down their website for about a month. Which brings me to the subject of my remarks this morning, Obamacare, which, much to the White House's chagrin, I'm sure, has been the biggest story in America for the last 2 weeks for all the wrong reasons from their vantage point. One word that we conservatives have deployed in describing Obamacare and the whole launch mess has been train wreck. Right? You've heard that word over and over again. It fits. The shoe fits. But what a lot of critics may not realize is that term was first attached to Obamacare by one of its key supporters. Back in April, Senator Max Baucus, a Democrat from Montana, who's retiring, by the way, and one of the primary legislative authors of Obamacare, he said that based on what he was hearing behind the scenes, the Obamacare implementation process might end up looking like, quote, a huge train wreck. That was in April. First warning. How prescient he was. But one train wreck, I don't think, really just does it justice. In my view, there are 3 concurrent train wrecks playing out right now, each of which is significant in its own way. I call them the 3 T's. You've got the technological train wreck, the testimony train wreck, and the true train wreck. Let's examine each of them one at a time. The technological train wreck speaks for itself, right? I mean, healthcare.gov is an embarrassment. The president's team has had 3.5 years to have healthcare.gov adequately prepared by October 1st. They spent, depending on what report you see, between $300 and $600 million of our dollars preparing a website that is broken. The White House still won't reveal how many people have actually managed to enroll in the exchanges so far, but CBS News had a scoop on Thursday. They reported that documents they'd obtained showed that 6 people managed to sign up on day 1 of Obamacare in the country. 6. That speaks for itself. 2 weeks ago, by which time the Obamacare rollout had already become a national laughingstock, the president delivered a speech that was so surreal, I'm still getting over it myself. He gave this victory lap speech in the Rose Garden about how awesome this law was. And sure, there have been a few snags, he said, but Obamacare really was a big success. And to illustrate that point, he had 13 people standing around him during the speech, sort of flanking him as human props. And these people supposedly represented Obamacare's success stories. They were handpicked by the president's staff. Well, guess what? The very next day, the Washington Examiner reported that just 3 out of those 13 people had actually signed up for Obamacare. The rest merely intended to do so, which is an interesting metric of success. Intending to do something. Success. Well done. And maybe the most memorable moment from that very long series of remarks from the president was when a woman standing right behind him, pregnant diabetic woman, fainted as he began to wrap up his comments. I still believe she might have just seen her new premiums. A little woozy here. But the president pressed on, undeterred, as he tends to do. He boasted that millions of unique users had visited healthcare.gov so far. And he said that indicated very high levels of interest in the program. And that sort of, okay, sounds impressive at first until you remember that his when that strong interest is mandatory, right? It's like the school teacher who goes home and brags to her husband, "My students must love me. They all handed in book reports this week." It's like, well, was it required? Oh, maybe that's why they did it. The president also told frustrated customers who were having trouble through the website that his team was working around the clock to get things fixed, but in the meantime, they could just dial up an 800 number to get enrolled. This pitch was sort of redolent of the ShamWow guy. Operators are standing by, America. Call this number. The problem, of course, was that the operators were standing by. They rely on the same busted website as everyone else. So, as the Washington Post and CNN reported, people actually cannot sign up by phone. They can apply, they cannot enroll. A third option the president mentioned was that you can actually go to brick-and-mortar Obamacare storefronts, and you can meet with trained navigators to get signed up. Again, we have the same problem with the website here because the navigators rely on the broken website at the end of the day. But I thought this was funny. In one instance, Obamacare's administrators actually published the wrong location address, which sent thousands of confused, uninsured New Yorkers to a cupcake shop in Brooklyn. Which I think actually is a great deal. You show up for Obamacare, you leave with a red velvet cupcake. That's a win, in my view. Although I understand that Michelle Obama was very displeased. So, on the tech stuff, where do things stand now? The White House has announced its famous tech surge to fix healthcare.gov. They won't tell us who's involved because they're the most transparent administration in the history of humanity. They say that things will be repaired by the end of this month. And by the way, based on the way the law needs to work, it better be fixed by the end of this month or they are in deep, deep trouble. Here's the problem. A lot of IT experts being quoted in the mainstream media, they're very skeptical of this new deadline. Some are estimating that the site's flaws are so complex and so deep that it could take up to 6 months to get it all straight. Two industry leaders were quoted by CNN saying that the most expeditious course of action at this stage would be to blow up the entire website and start from scratch. I'm not kidding. We have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into this thing, and experts from the outside are saying it is so bad, it would be better off grooming all of it and starting again. It's breathtaking. So, and Tim made this point, and it's the point that I think we need to make over and over again. They had 3.5 years and $500 million to build a website and could not do it. And now we are to believe that they are going to administer our health care in a competent and professional and empathetic way? I don't think so. So, one more note on the tech side of things. The administration is fond of telling us that the state exchanges, right, those 14 or so state exchanges, are functioning much better than the federal one. And some liberals cite this as evidence that it's Republican obstructionism that's really to blame for this whole faceplant that we've seen nationwide. There's a few problems with that argument. First of all, Democrats and only Democrats wrote this law, and the law allows states the flexibility to decide whether or not to set up an exchange. The majority of states decided not to. Is that their fault, or is that the fault of the people who wrote the law, who are now complaining that people took the option that's in the law? And then the other point is, these websites at the state level are insanely expensive. CBS News just reported $1 billion combined for those 14 state websites. They also haven't been that much more effective than healthcare.gov. For instance, in Oregon, where there's not a single Republican office holder anywhere in sight, Oregon's exchange has signed up, as of yesterday, exactly 0 people after a month. 0. So, I think maybe Republicans sabotaged Oregon's system by ESP from afar or something. So, next, the testimony train wreck. And by this, of course, I'm referring to Kathleen Sebelius's less than excellent adventure on Capitol Hill this week. Here's a woman who has presided over, honestly, one of the most glaring, humiliating failures in United States history. She was there every step of the way, and she still has her job. It's incredible. I get so frustrated by the lack of accountability, but I have to confess that on Wednesday morning, for a few hours, I was really grateful that President Obama has decided to keep her at the helm, because she really couldn't have been any worse. And it was appropriate that her incompetence was on full display for the nation to see. She was there representing her boss and representing him quite well, if you think about it. I could go on for an hour about her testimony. I won't. I'll try to boil it down to a few key exchanges in case you have a life and didn't sit watching C-SPAN for 5 hours like I did. At one point, a congressman asked Sebelius about the website crashing, and she actually corrected him, informing him that, quote, "The website has never crashed. I kid you not." This is the best part. CNN was covering these hearings live. When she said the website has never crashed, within 5 seconds they went to a split screen of her and the crashed website. And as a matter of fact, Obamacare's website was down for the entire duration of her testimony, which was sort of, I think, poetic justice. Another congressman, Cory Gardner, who's an up-and-coming conservative from Colorado, he challenged Sebelius as to why she hadn't chosen to sign up for her own health care through the Obamacare exchange. Well, she shot right back at him. She said it would be illegal for her to do so. Liberals on Twitter were like high-fiving, yeah, she got him, until journalists started pointing out, actually, she was dead wrong. It would be absolutely legal for her to sign up for coverage through Obamacare if she chose to do so, which she hasn't. Her assertion that it would be unlawful for her to go into the exchange betrays either almost a supernatural ability to lie or an astonishing lack of knowledge about the contents of the law she's in charge of. Think about that. Later, Sebelius was pressed on the question of whether the president is ultimately responsible for this whole debacle. She was visibly agitated by this line of inquiry and eventually was a little flustered and shrugged, whatever. One of my colleagues quipped that whatever might be a fitting slogan for the second term of the Obama administration. In another embarrassing moment, one of Sebelius' advisors, she has these lawyers sitting behind her who will occasionally whisper things to her, and she gets a little bit of help, she's like phoning a friend back there. And I'm not quite sure, some wires got crossed, and in the middle of the testimony, with an open mic, she hissed, "Don't do this to me." Which is precisely how most Americans feel about Obama. There's new slogans coming out of this testimony. She really was fabulous. Thanks, Cap. And maybe the most preposterous moment of her testimony came when she asserted that she had, quote, no indication that things were going to go this badly, and that, quote, no one had recommended delaying the law before it went live. No indication? No indication, really? The New York Times has reported that internal memos raised urgent red flags for months leading up to October 1st. Remember, they delayed parts of the law already. I mean, they unilaterally delayed stuff because of these red flags. And she says she had no indication. The Washington Post, this is incredibly damning, confirmed that in last-minute testing, just days before the October 1st launch, healthcare.gov crashed with only a few hundred simultaneous users. What sort of indication did she need that this thing did her computer need to burst into flames for her to realize, well, gee. And then, as for the statement that no one had suggested a delay, has Sebelius ever met, a single Republican on planet Earth? Indeed, House Republicans passed a bill to delay Obamacare for a year, just weeks before the site melted down. The president threatened to veto that bill, and Democrats killed it, leading to the government shutdown. Right? Remember that? Now you've got a bunch of panicky Democrats scrambling to embrace the very sort of delay that they shut the government down to block like 3 weeks ago. We are in the very best of hands. Lastly, what I call the true train wreck. Because let's face it, they're going to fix the website, eventually. The furor over Kathleen Sebelius' cartoonishly bad testimony is going to subside. It'll be in the rearview mirror. But when those fleeting issues are behind us, Obamacare itself will still be an unworkable, unaffordable, unfair monstrosity. for all the reasons that we conservatives have been warning about for years now. We've been right every step of the way, and there are plenty of told-you-so moments yet to come. Remember, how was this law sold? With two, among other things, two really core, high-profile, memorable promises. The first one, we can probably all say it together. If you like your plan, you can keep it. Period. No one will take it away, no matter what. Period. The president was unequivocal and categorical about this promise. We know how that's gone. NBC News this week reporting what we knew. Internal White House estimates dating back 3 years indicated that, in fact, millions of Americans would not be able to retain their plans. So they knew this line was false, but they repeated it ad nauseum anyway. Why? Why would they risk so much for a clearly impossible promise? Well, remember, even though Democrats had these super huge majorities in 2009 and 2010, Obamacare, like it is now, was very unpopular prior to passage. Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi had very little wiggle room, not a single vote to spare in the Senate, and about 3 votes, give or take, in the House. And Nancy Pelosi was whipping those votes up at the very last minute. So the president and his allies needed low-information voters who might have been, on some level, uncomfortable with the notion of Obamacare to at least be pacified by a false sense of security about their own situation. Because if people thought that they would be unaffected by the law, they were less likely to press hard and join the chorus fighting it. So this was a cynical, calculated, means-to-an-end lie. There's no sugarcoating it. It's a lie. It's disgusting. And those who perpetrated it should be held accountable by voters. Now this week, I love this, a few vulnerable Democrats in the Senate have started pushing a new bill that would require the president to keep his promise. And Republican Ron Johnson up in Wisconsin has cunningly introduced a bill called the, quote, "If you like your plan, you can keep it Act." Which I love. And honestly, that might be too much for some Democrats to resist at this point because of the public outrage that's been growing. I actually hope Harry Reid allows a vote on the "If you like your plan, you can keep it" Act, if only to have this very special experience of witnessing the absurd spectacle of the president vetoing a law literally named after his most famous promise. That will be spectacular. There's a secret that these Democrats don't want voters to know about, whether it's Mary Landrieu or Kay Hagan or Mark Pryor, or the list goes on, Jane Shaheen up in New Hampshire. Republicans introduced exactly this legislation in 2010, when it could have actually made a difference. Every single Senate Democrat voted no. So their desperate 13th hour feigned shock machinations are pure posturing. And I hope the American people see through it. The second famous promise was premiums will go down by $2,500 per family and overall health care spending will decrease. Let's address the latter claim first. The government's own bookkeepers have blown it out of the water. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, have run the numbers and determined that aggregate health care spending by the U.S. government over the next decade will be $621 billion higher than it would have been without Obamacare. The president talked about bending the cost curve down. He's done the opposite. As for premiums, show of hands. How many of your premiums are dropping even $1 next year? How many people's premiums are staying flat year over year? How many people's premiums are going up? I'm in that boat as well. My premiums are jumping significantly in 2014, and I'm in the employer-based market, not the individual market, where the sticker shock will be most acute. There's this myth that the left is now really clinging to, that people in the employer market won't be affected by Obamacare. It's not true. People are going to be dumped from their coverage, first of all. That's going to be a process that will last years. And premiums are going up in the employer-based market. And we were told our premiums were going to drop, all of us. They made these blanket promises to every single one of us. and they're not following through, to say the very least. A Manhattan Institute study concluded that across two key demographics, at least as far as the sustainability of the law is concerned, 27-year-olds and 40-year-olds, the average premium increase on the individual market will be 99% increase for men and a 62% increase for women. An independent analysis done for National Journal revealed that, quote, for the vast majority of Americans, premium prices will be higher in the individual exchange than what they're currently paying for employer-sponsored benefits, end quote. Even after taxpayer-funded subsidies were factored in, the analysis showed, about 2/3 of individuals in this group will end up paying more, not less, under Obamacare. And for many young people, people in my age demographic, we're going to end up paying much, much higher premiums with triple-digit percentage increases. And what you have now is average people, including more than a few liberals, experiencing a very rude awakening. One man from the San Francisco Bay Area was quoted in the local press. He said, I was laughing at Boehner until the mail came today. I can understand why Republicans are so pissed about this. When you take $10,000 out of my family's pocket each year, that's otherwise disposable income or retirement savings that will not go into our local economy. Yes, sir. Welcome to the conservative movement. Another San Francisco resident added his gripe, and this is priceless. He said, of course I want people to have health care. I just didn't realize I would be the one who was going to pay for it personally. See, this is what happens when you tune out what conservatives say because they're a bunch of lying racists or whatever. Like, you miss a lot of important information. A young woman from Southern California was quoted in the LA Times. It was a story about how badly Obamacare is hitting the middle class. Her quote, I was all for Obamacare until I found out I was paying for it. Finally, one Obamacare navigator in Colorado summarized this whole program pretty succinctly. She was asked by a local news station out in Colorado how many people she had helped sign up for coverage under the new law. Here's what she said. Thus far, everyone's taken a look at the rates and they've walked out the door. It's sticker shock. They just can't afford it. The Affordable Care Act at work. We conservatives can take some satisfaction in having been absolutely right about this law from day one. But self-satisfaction and smugness won't do a thing to help roll it back. And it is harming people. See, that's the thing. We're not against this law because we hate the president. We're not against this law because the president happens to be black. All these smears we've heard for years. We're against this law because it was sold using lies, and it hurts people. That's why we're against this law. So, I'll close with this. I mentioned the told you so impulse earlier, and there'll be lots of opportunities for that over the next few months and years. And I think it's fine for us to point out that we accurately predicted a lot of this stuff. In fact, it adds to our credibility. But we shouldn't get carried away. We shouldn't lecture and shame average people for failing to have rushed to the ramparts with us to fight the law. We are experiencing right now what the president might call a teachable moment. Scales are falling from people's eyes as the undeniable truth is now on display in real time. There's no explaining this away. Facts are facts. It's no longer hypothetical to people. We need to patiently and warmly welcome new converts into our ranks. And even if people aren't willing to self-identify as conservatives just yet, we should at least encourage them to take a fresh look at the efficacy of big government solutions. If Jon Stewart is having second thoughts, a lot of people must be. On his show the other night, Stewart shook his head at Democrats, almost like a disappointed parent, scolding them for trying to dress this failure up. You can't spin this turd, he said. No, they can't. But if we focus our efforts, stop with our relentless internal fighting and backbiting, and win a few elections, we can beat this turd and repeal it. So for the good of the country, seriously, let's keep our eye on the ball. Let's go out. Let's win. Thank you. guys so much.